Hey, BridgeWay, Pastor Ron here. I hope you're doing well. Hey, I was just putting the finishing touches on my sermon for this weekend, and it got me thinking about something. I started to wonder, when was the last time I gave a normal sermon on the weekend? And by that I mean, when was the last time we had like a large gathering of people, all face to face, together worshiping in the same room? And it was a long time ago. It was like 22 weeks ago. I had to look at my calendar. And yet, I remember that weekend so well, the very beginning of March. And it was great. We were all together worshiping. I remember that weekend we had communion. In fact, the Saturday night service, we had something very special. We had a meal afterwards. We had tacos together. It was great. There were hugs and handshakes, and there wasn't even a thought about having to wear a mask. Now, obviously, a lot has changed over these weeks. And I just wanted to spend a few moments as I felt God kind of giving me this idea of really how we deal with change. In fact, I think that most of life is dealing with change, and a great portion of how your spiritual life goes will depend on how you handle change. We call it kind of change management. Now, change isn't always bad. In fact, a lot of times, change is associated with some really good things, right? Like you kind of have what we call this upgrade cycle. You get a new home, or you get a new car, or you get a new phone. And a lot of times, change has to do with something new or shiny or better. But obviously, during COVID, that hasn't been the case. I remember at the very beginning of this pandemic, I said to my wife, Sean, I said, how do we come out of this better? And I didn't mean that in an arrogant way, and I certainly didn't mean it as a cliche. I honestly wanted that to be the case. And we tried. But it didn't take very long, only a few weeks in, where we began to notice in our own lives just the effect of change in the COVID season, right? I mean, we had job loss in our own home and family members being furloughed. I watched my kids who had events during that period of time and had trained and rehearsed for these special events, watch them get canceled and trips postponed. In fact, even just this whole idea of kind of this grand experiment of forced togetherness, right? 7 Allbachs in the same home, 1,600 square feet together, posed some significant changes on the way in which we lived. In fact, a lot of those things were good. I would say that every meal felt like a Thanksgiving dinner together with our large group. But a lot has happened, and yet we still find ourselves in the middle of this pandemic. And this past week, I was kind of asking myself that same question again. How do we come through this better? But my perspective is different. I actually mean that by how do we come through this better spiritually? In sort of our connection with God? How do we have kind of an upgrade cycle in the way in which we connect to God? And I think a lot of it has to do with how we deal with change. I was reading through the Gospel of John, and I read the most famous verse in all of the Scripture. You already know it, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. But I paid more attention and more careful attention to the verses just before that. And in this conversation that Jesus is having with this religious leader, Nicodemus, what they're discussing is how to deal with change. And Nicodemus, as this very bright religious leader, can see change coming, can see the kingdom of God approaching in what Jesus is preaching and teaching and what it would mean for him to be born again and to follow Jesus. And Nicodemus, like us, kind of struggles with that change. He wants precision. He wants details. He wants accuracy. How is this going to affect me? And the response that Jesus gives is sort of mystifying. And yet at the same time, very inviting and freeing for us as well. It's in John chapter 3, verse 8, that Jesus says these words, "The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit." You hear that and you think, so did God just say my life spiritually is like the wind? He actually said, so it is. And that can sort of seem kind of daunting, right? Like, you mean, Jesus, this is just all kind of up to you? Yes, that's what he's saying. So it is with anyone born of the Spirit, like dust in the wind. And while that may seem daunting to you and to me, and it certainly did to Nicodemus, you might be thinking, I'm the type that I want direction. I want a Google map or Siri or my spouse to tell me which way to go. And in this case, Jesus says it's going to take something different. It's going to take faith. So it is with anyone born of the Spirit. The wind blows wherever God directs it, and that wind is the Spirit of God. Now, something kind of interesting about the wind, you have an option with the wind. You can either go with it or you can fight it. I experienced this the other day. I was swimming out at Boswick Lake and doing some training. Sean and I were swimming together, and it was a particularly windy day and a particularly hard swim. I got back and I looked at my watch, and it's like, that was pathetic. I was so slow swimming that day. And obviously it was the wind and the waves. But as I was kind of lamenting my poor workout, I looked out and there were 2 sailboats just effortlessly gliding across the water. Sails were full of wind. And then right in front of me, they did this move where they turned 180 degrees, and without missing a beat, the 2 sailboats in synchronicity sailed back off the other direction into the sunset. It was so beautiful, and I think it was a lesson for me that, Ron, you can fight against the wind, or you can learn to go with it. What if we actually in our spiritual lives began to develop this practice of listening for the wind, hearing the wind, and rather than trying to tell the wind where to go or resist where the wind is going, we actually decided to go with the wind. And that takes faith, friends. I want to encourage you in this season. I want to just come alongside of you as your pastor and say that wind, that voice of God is available to every single person. And I believe that if you listen with a still small voice, you will hear that wind. And that wind can carry you through all change. The things that in change that are hard to deal with, and the things that in change that can be a great joy in your spiritual life. I want to encourage you in this season. God is still in control. God is still over everything. He still sits on his throne, and he sends out this wind, and he invites us as the church to follow him and to follow into that wind. You know, a lot of people have also asked me during this time, like this question of how's the church doing? And I think that's such a caring and loving question. And I want to tell you, the church here at BridgeWay, we are doing very, very well. In fact, God has blessed our church in this season. I'm so thankful that we've kind of come through this season, and now we are back to services. I'm grateful for that. I know for many of you, you're still not ready to come back to the building for services, and we fully understand that. That's why we continue to offer church online. In fact, thank you for being patient with us. We are making improvements. It's been a bit of a learning curve with church online, installing cameras and making the connections, but we are actually making some great improvements, and we'll be able to live stream the service within a matter of just maybe 4 or 5 more weeks. And so thank you for being patient with us. The process will continue to get better as that is improved and added here to our building. For those of you who are coming to the service here, we're so grateful to have you. It's been great to be worshiping together. I know some have asked, well, hey, I don't know if I can come back to church because I'm not sure if there's room yet. We want to tell you there's plenty of room in our services, plenty of room in our gatherings. We are practicing social distancing, so the chairs are spread out. It just makes it safer that way. We are encouraging masks as well. And so we would love to have you in services here with us. But if you're not ready, then continue to be a part of our community online. I wanted to also let you know that as a church, as a staff, we've experienced some change as well. You probably have heard the news by now. Michelle Williams has decided to retire. She has been our children's ministry director for 11 years, and she has done such a phenomenal job. We are going to miss her, but we are also celebrating the direction that God has in her life, and couldn't be more happy for her. She's not leaving us yet. In fact, she's staying on until her replacement is found. In fact, we actually are hiring 2 people in children's ministry to come alongside of Christine Cry and to build that team. So it takes 2 people to fill Michelle's shoes. But we're excited about that. If you have any questions or if you're interested in learning more about those openings, please don't hesitate to let us know. Also, in the change category, we hired a new worship leader, a director of worship, and his name is Dan Mack. He is just started last weekend. He is a phenomenal guy. I can't wait for you to meet him. He has just been such a blessing to have join us and to join our team. I'm excited about our future and having Dan a part of it. But mostly, I just want to take a few minutes and tell you, as your pastor, I miss you and I love you. Your elders and your staff here, we are praying for you, and we just want to encourage you and see you become all that God has created you to be. May you follow His wind and His direction, and may you keenly hear His voice. Love you, BridgeWay. We'll see you soon. God bless.